Good morning again. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. So, yeah, we're in the midst of a little bit of a snowstorm here. I did a review, a movie this morning, and I was in the midst of posting it, but the connection is all knocked out. So, kind of a pain in the ass in this day and era that that's still a thing, but it is what it is. So, in the time being, I have obviously there's time I've been sitting on a pile of movies that I've been wanting to talk about. So I just figured, what the hell? I'll do another show for another movie that I've been really wanting to talk about. And again, I've been going back into the murky, seedy world of low budget exploitation, the exploitation world. It's my favorite. It's my jam. And so I've been again. I went to Bull Moose a couple weeks ago and really scored on some really killer movies. So stay tuned for some more videos coming up in the next week. I just started doing a show, and it's going to be a series on the Paul Naschy collection. And I just finished the video for that this morning, and I'll probably upload it. I might upload it today, depending on how the connection is. But if not today, it'll be tomorrow or this week. It's today's Wednesday, and today's also the first snow day that I've had all year, that I believe, for 2024 and 2025. And here we are at the very end of January, so kind of weird, kind of strange that it's the only snow day we've had so far. So it is what it is. So today's show is going to be on this little gem of a movie. And again, I have been really focusing on the world of exploitation, and I've always said too, I take chances all the time, where especially the last couple of years, and now it's kind of been a routine thing where I've been buying all kinds of movies that I've never seen before. And I have to say, in the last 4 years or so, just really basically since COVID came, I started buying a shit ton of movies, much more than I had done in the past. And again, I've been really wanting to, the last 4 or 5 years, I've been really wanting to, I always loved exploitation movies, and especially horror exploitation movies. And I've always, loved the ones that I've seen. I grew up watching a lot of these films, but I didn't have a whole lot in my collection. I had a few, but I was obsessed with those movies. And so I've made it a point to really focus in on buying up as many of those titles as I can. And so that's kind of where I kind of repurposed my habits that way. I still buy, like, I guess, normal movies, but I don't know. Most of the time I think like normal movies are, I don't know, kind of boring. I watched a movie last night, or I should say the other night. Again, this is just kind of an example of how my weird brain works, but and I love quote unquote normal movies, big Hollywood movies, big budget Hollywood films, horror films, action movies. But again, exploitation's my jam. And I still watch, normal movies, but so the other night I watched Ronin with Robert De Niro, which is a Frankenheimer film, I believe. And it's a good movie. It's a pretty good thriller, kind of a spy film. It's got some great chase sequences. I think it's one of De Niro's, like, he had this period in his history of of acting where he really became a super parody of himself, and I actually think he's really good in this film. And it's one of his later films. But I watched it the other night. I had a buddy, just, it came up in conversation couple weeks ago or less than that, where he was talking about Ronin and that he like that's one of his comfort movies. That's one of his favorite all time movies. So the other night I was like, you know what? I own that. I haven't seen it in a really long time. I have it on DVD. I have a pretty good copy of it on DVD. So I watched it, and it's a good movie. It's solid. It's fun, you know. But it's funny because the night before I watched another amazing exploitation movie which I had never seen called The Italian Connection from like 1972. Super gritty, dirty, nasty, uber violent, amazing chase sequences. It's like a mafia crime film. It's an Italian movie, and you know, I noticed like interesting parallels between both movies. They both are, you know, they both films take place in Europe. There's a lot of beautiful shots and scenes of the architecture in Europe, and there's a lot of big panning shots. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of great car chase scenes in the film that are just really kind of a wonder to watch, and they're just really great. But I don't know, and it's like I'm not knocking it, but I kind of felt like, man, I really liked the Italian Connection more than Ronin. It just like it was more visceral and just more brutal and just more exciting and just more raw. And Ronin's great, you know. I'm not, but I was like, and this movie, and I kind of felt after watching Ronin, and like halfway through, I was like, it's it's kind of a long movie. It's like 2 hours or so, but it kind of felt like it dragged, and I was like, man, aesthetically and vibe wise, it's very similar to the Italian Connection, and Ronin is a big budget Hollywood film. You know, it had these big kind of elaborate car chase scenes, and there's a lot of action sequences within that, a lot of gunplay, and but I was like, man, I have to say I got more of a thrill out of watching the Italian Connection just because it was like so much more raw and like dangerous, you know. So, but anyway, the movie I'm going to talk about today, which is an awesome movie, it's my first time seeing it. I'd never even heard about this film before, and I was so blown away by it. And it's really, really good. And like a horror, kind of like a collection of, kind of a short of these like little short stories within a movie, and it's a beautiful DVD, really beautiful packaging. It's got great special features. It's called Screams Screams of a Winter Night. I picked this up. I never even heard of this movie before. Definitely have never seen it before. And this movie just totally kicks ass. Like, yeah, it's awesome. It was put out by Code Red, which is another boutique label, which I'm not sure. They were kind of one of the boutique labels that started pretty early in kind of this renaissance that we've been living in, as far as like companies putting out all of these super low budget exploitation movies. I'm not sure. I had heard that Code Red does not exist anymore. I could be wrong. But anyway, I have a few other titles from Code Red. I have some Dario Argento films that Code Red had put out that are fantastic. But this was a Code Red film, and this came out in 1979. One of the primetime movies of all, primetime year. Again, his film is Screams of a Winter Night. I had never seen it before, and I just think it's an awesome movie. It's an interesting film because it's essentially like it came out in '79. And again, I never heard of this film. The transfer for this movie on Blu-ray is pretty spectacular, and it's kind of like a collection of short stories. It's kind of a movie within a movie. Great cast, really great cast. And the other interesting thing about this movie is, or the main thing about this movie that makes it so interesting, is essentially it's a film. It's definitely a horror movie. It's definitely like a really low budget, uber low budget exploitation movie. It's got some very cheesy moments and maybe some bad acting, and but it's got awesome atmosphere. And I always say, films if a film's got kick-ass atmosphere, for the most part, I will be in it to win it. But it's got a really great cast. Again, never heard of this film. Mary Agent Cox is in this film. Gil Glasgow, Patrick Byers, Ray Gaspard, and William Ragsdale. And it was directed by James L. Wilson. And again, it came out in '79. Beautiful package. There's a lot of great special features on here. The um, the premise of the movie is basically it's about and it's got a slasher vibe to it. It also has kind of like your classic, almost like gothic ghost story vibe. It also is kind of a monster movie, and it's the premise more or less of the film is about this group of young people that are staying at this in this cabin in the woods, and they basically hang out in this cabin and drinking beer and partying and whatnot. But the film is kind of centered on them essentially telling these really good horror stories, like ghost stories around a fire camp kind of a thing. It's that classic, that classic thing that you hear in literature or that you see in literature. Great classic ghost stories that that people want to talk about and share these stories. And so essentially these young people or kids are in this cabin and they're each sharing these different kinds of ghost stories or monster stories. Some that are supposedly true, some that are made up, and all of these things. But the real interesting thing about this movie is as they're telling the story, they actually the these stories are reenacted, and they are these little shorts or kind of vignettes of each tale. But the really cool thing about this movie is the actors that are in the cast play these other characters in these other sequences. So it's really cool. And so you have the cast and the actors playing kind of multiple roles all within each other. And it's really good. It's really, again, really great atmosphere. There's some really great suspense in this movie. There's some chilling moments. And again, it's super cheesy. It's definitely an exploitation movie. It's super low budget, but it's really good. And there's like some of the short stories are really gripping and kind of scary. It's great. I never heard of this movie before, and I'm a big fan of, I grew up watching one of my favorite horror television shows was Tales from the Dark Side, and also like Tales from the Crypt, Creep Show, all those great classic collections of ghost stories and monster stories. And these were series. This is kind of like in that vein. It's kind of got that classic kind of vibe to it of those great classic TV shows. And it's got, like a series of all of these different kind of short stories within the movie. And it's really good. Like great atmosphere, some great kills actually. And again, it's got a little bit of, it's got something for everyone in it. It's got, your classic kind of ghost story. Um, you got like your monster kind of a thing. Also, your classic monster movie. It's got a little bit of a slasher movie vibe to it. very spooky, great atmosphere, and generally some incredibly creepy moments. There's one sequence in particular where there's a couple, a young couple that gets stranded in the woods, and they are one of the people that's in the car. It's like a boyfriend and girlfriend. One of the the the, the boyfriend decides to leave his girlfriend at the car, and he decides the car runs. They run out of gas, and they're in the middle of nowhere in the woods. So what he decides to do, being kind of a bonehead, he decides to try to go find a gas station by foot. So he grabs a container and he goes on foot and he tries to find this gas station, but he ends up losing his way and he gets lost in these woods. And supposedly, this wooded area, there is like this witch that lives in the woods, and it's about what happens to them. But it's really good. It's really effective. It's super creepy, super minimalist, but really great film. Really, really awesome film. And I, again, was really surprised with this movie. Had never seen it before. It was my first time viewing it, and I just bought it on a whim. It was really cheap, and it's a great addition to my ever growing collection of horror exploitation movies. I've never heard of this movie. I've never heard anybody talk about this movie. I hear a lot of people do talk about those kinds of the classic kind of Tales from the Crypt and the Creep Show, like those kinds of movies. You hear those talked a lot about, but I never this has never come up anywhere as far as I know. But really great, really fantastic horror film or collection of horror films in the exploitation world. And again, it came out in '79, which is prime time for me. So I highly recommend this movie. It's really great. It's super entertaining. It's classic horror, and it does within the genre of horror and in the genre of exploitation, it's got something for everyone. It's really good, and I'm super excited. I bought it, so definitely check this one out. It is worth your time and your money. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.